I was the man who stood by Miriam Vance for 6 years and planned 3 different weddings, yet I was never the lead in any of our milestones. Even a simple gift like a pair of boots became a joke about my old man style after Joey Sinclair mocked them. She even took the handwriting I had perfected over the years and compared it unfavorably to Joey's illegible scribbles, holding his up as the standard of art to her friends. She always reminded me that she was just my girlfriend and didn't belong to me, yet she would watch the ocean with Joey or rush to his side because of a minor car issue. Meanwhile, she was perfectly fine leaving me in a dangerous, high-crime neighborhood at night to wait for a friend to pick me up. She never realized that every bit of resentment I suppressed finally gave me the strength to walk away when she turned our 3rd wedding into another cruel joke. On the night before the wedding, Miriam's childhood friend Joey Sinclair posted a photo on Facebook. He was wearing my wedding suit with his arm around Miriam's shoulder. The caption said he wanted to feel the joy of being with her one last time and joked that I should cancel the wedding so he wouldn't be restricted to wearing the suit for just one day. He deleted the post almost immediately, but then let out a dramatic sigh and told her that since she would belong to another man tomorrow, he was just feeling nostalgic. He acted surprised that her fiancé, Edward Miller, would actually be upset by it. Miriam immediately changed her iMessage background to a photo of her and Joey with their faces pressed together. She told me that they had grown up together and that he viewed her as a younger sister. She asked what was wrong with a brother having a hard time letting go of his sister. She threatened that if I continued being so passive-aggressive and jealous, we should just call off the wedding. I told her I wasn't being jealous. I genuinely wanted to cancel the whole thing. By the time Miriam returned to our apartment in Boston, I had finished writing all the formal letters to our guests regarding the cancellation. She picked one up and skimmed it, asking with a nonchalant smile if I had written them myself. I gave her a simple nod. She let out a soft laugh and told me that explains why the handwriting was so hideous. I went quiet, remembering the first love letter I ever sent her. I had seen her at a horse show and was completely captivated by her presence in the saddle. She had teased me about my writing back then as well. It had bothered me so much that I spent years practicing different styles of calligraphy to improve. Yet, every time I showed her my progress, she would just dismiss it and say that she loved me regardless of my poor handwriting. Everything changed when her friends saw my handwritten notes and complimented how beautiful they were. Miriam immediately pulled out a piece of paper covered in unrecognizable scribbles and threw it on the table. She told them that they didn't know what they were talking about and that this paper represented real art. I later discovered that those hideous scribbles were actually written by Joey Sinclair. I didn't say a word to her and just kept packing my belongings. When she saw that I wasn't reacting to her, she leaned in and wrapped her arms around my waist to act cute. She told me she was done teasing me and had brought me a present. She pushed a pair of boots toward me, but I just glanced at them before opening the shoe cabinet. I pulled out an identical pair that was already cracked and worn out. I told her thanks, but I already owned them. Miriam froze for a moment, and her expression immediately soured. Those boots were the gift she gave me for our first anniversary. I never liked wearing boots, but I wore them back then just to please her when we met her friends. When Joey had just returned to the city, he saw them and burst out laughing. He asked if I was going for an old man look and pointed out that the leather was already peeling. I didn't know what to say in that moment, but I watched Miriam playfully punch Joey in the chest and tell him to stop because not everyone could look as good as him in everything. Joey just laughed while ruffling her hair and told her it was only because she picked out all his clothes. From that point on, I realized that Miriam personally selected every single outfit Joey wore. That was the first time we had a massive argument. She usually kept her cool, but I pushed her to her limit that day. She shouted that since they grew up together, if she actually wanted to be with him, I wouldn't even be in the picture. She told me that if I wanted to be so dramatic, we shouldn't be together at all. I ended up having to swallow my pride and beg her not to leave me just to end the fight. Those boots became a symbol of my humiliation, and I had kept them locked away in the back of my closet ever since. Miriam seemed to have forgotten the entire incident because she went out and bought me the exact same pair again. She must have felt a little guilty because she stepped forward to hug me and apologized. She claimed she had been so busy lately that she simply picked the wrong style by mistake. She told me she would take me to buy new ones right now and that I could pick any style I wanted. She said she wanted me to know that she was serious about marrying me this time. I stayed silent. This was already our 3rd attempt at a wedding. During our first engagement, Joey had snatched my wedding ring and started waving it around on his own finger. When I demanded he give it back, Miriam told me I had no sense of humor and that wedding fell apart. The second time, as the priest was asking Miriam if she took me as her husband, Joey shouted a loud no from the pews and laughed. I humiliated him so badly in front of everyone that he ended up slinking out of the church. Miriam immediately threw off her veil and called the whole thing off. She She told me that Joey would always be her brother whether she married or not, and if her husband could treat him so poorly, she would rather stay single forever. I told her calmly that 3 strikes meant the game was over. I felt her arms stiffen as she held me. She looked like she was about to lose her temper, but she stopped when she saw the coldness in my eyes. She softened her voice and said she knew I was still upset about the suit incident. For once, her usually careless eyes looked sincere as she promised to personally order a new one for me. She ignored me when I tried to stop her and grabbed her phone to send a message to our wedding group. She announced that there was an issue with my suit and that the wedding would have to be pushed back. I frowned and told her to stop, but the message was already out. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the door, insisting that we go pick out a new suit for her husband. I told her to let go, and my face was dark with frustration. She just kept smiling as she dragged me down to the car and shoved me into the passenger seat. As I reached for the door handle to get out, I noticed a photo of Joey Sinclair stuck to the center console. Right next to it was a note in Miriam's unmistakable handwriting stating that this was Joey's exclusive seat and no one else was allowed to sit there. Miriam reached over and ripped the sticker off. She told me Joey had just done it for a laugh, but she would get rid of it if it bothered me. She crumpled the paper and tossed it aside with a casual shrug, clearly not taking the situation seriously. That was always her pattern. She would fix whatever boundary Joey crossed, but she always acted like I was overreacting to something minor. Whenever I finally lost my temper, she would ask me why I was making such a big deal out of nothing. I told her it didn't matter and that she didn't actually have to tear the sticker off. Miriam looked at me with a sudden flash of disbelief. In the past, I would have been furious and demanded she explain why he felt entitled to do that. She let out a small laugh as she started the car and told me she knew I was still angry. She promised to pick out the best suit in the world and said we were finally going to have a real, proper wedding. I told her flatly that the wedding wasn't happening anymore and that she didn't need to bother. Her hands faltered on the wheel for a second, but then she just playfully punched my arm. She didn't take me seriously at all and told me to stop being annoying and saying stupid things. This was actually the first time in all our wedding attempts that Miriam had actually shown up to help me pick a suit. As she started listing her demands to the tailor, I interrupted her and said I wasn't there to buy anything. I told the clerk I was there to ask about a refund. The tailor looked confused and mentioned that Miriam had said we were getting married. Miriam quickly cut in and claimed I was just talking about the previous measurements not being right. I might have imagined it, but I thought I saw a flicker of genuine panic in her eyes. She turned to me and nervously asked me to back her up. The tailor asked if I wanted to adjust the sizing, which made me think of the photo of Joey wearing my suit. I looked at the clerk and asked if we could discuss the matter in private. Miriam seemed relieved when I stepped away with the tailor, assuming I was just being picky. She even asked if I was planning to upgrade to a fully bespoke option. I just gave her a nod, and the tailor joked that I was probably planning a surprise for her. Miriam laughed and gave me a little tap on the chest, saying she would wait for me in the car. I gently moved her hand away and shut the door to the office. When I finished and walked out, I found her on the phone in the driver's seat. She signaled for me to hop in as I approached. As soon as I sat down, I heard Joey Sinclair's voice coming through the speakers asking about the car door. Miriam told him it was just her fiancé and that she was helping me pick out a suit. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Joey's voice came back, sounding pathetic as he told her that his car had broken down. I noticed Miriam's grip on the steering wheel tighten immediately. Joey claimed the car had stalled and the doors were jammed, trapping him inside. Before Miriam could respond, I told her to drop me off at home first. She froze in place. I looked at her and said I wasn't going to stop her from helping him, but since she was the one who drove me here, she had an obligation to take me home before running off. Joey's voice was actually trembling over the phone as he called her name. I reached over and took the phone from Miriam's hand. I told Joey that even if he was stuck, he could turn on his hazards and use the emergency hammer to break the glass. I pointed out that my house was only a few minutes away and suggested that if he really couldn't wait, he should take those steps. Miriam snatched the phone back and glared at me with pure shock. She reminded me that Joey was claustrophobic and asked how I could be so cruel. She couldn't believe I wanted her to take me home while he was trapped in a car. She threw it in my face that she had just bought me a new suit and accused me of being irrationally jealous. I stayed calm and told her I wasn't jealous. I reminded her that we were in a part of town where you couldn't get an Uber and there weren't even any streetlights. I mentioned that there had been an armed robbery in this exact spot 2 months ago and that walking home alone would be dangerous. Joey started sobbing through the phone, begging Miriam to hurry up and save him. Miriam's breathing became erratic and she reached over to shove my door open. She clicked my seatbelt off and literally pushed me out of the car. She yelled that I was becoming impossible to deal with and told me to stay there and cool off. She floored the gas and took off, leaving me standing in the freezing wind. I hadn't even had a chance to change before we left, so I was barely dressed for the winter weather. It was the middle of January and the the wind felt like ice against my skin. I couldn't stop shivering as I stood there in the dark. Eventually, my friend Alan Brooks drove all the way out to that pitch-black alley to pick me up. He was swearing the whole time, asking if Miriam had really lost her mind by dumping me in a place where someone had recently been killed. I told him to relax and wrapped myself in the blanket he had brought for me, unable to stop sneezing. I checked my phone and saw that Joey had already updated his Facebook. He was wrapped in a blanket with his arm around Miriam, who looked like she had fallen asleep on his shoulder. His caption thanked her and said she was always there for him whenever he needed her. I showed the screen to Alan and joked that Joey's blanket didn't look nearly as comfortable as the one he brought. Alan looked surprised. I had fallen apart over Miriam so many times that he expected to spend the night dealing with a breakdown. He was shocked that I could actually make a joke about it. He finally let out a laugh and asked me if I had any idea how high quality his gear was. Miriam was already home by the time I sat down to eat a bowl of late-night pasta. She noticed there was only one serving and asked why I hadn't made anything for her. I finished my last bite and told her she could find her own food if she was hungry. I walked right past her to the kitchen without even looking at her. She stood there looking completely stunned. No matter how bad our fights used to be, I always made sure she had a meal waiting for her. She had come home looking miserable, clearly expecting me to apologize and comfort her like I always did. Instead, I just washed my bowl and went straight to the bedroom without acknowledging her presence. She grabbed my wrist and asked me to stop being so difficult. She argued that Joey's claustrophobia was a real emergency and that he would have had a breakdown if she hadn't arrived. She claimed I was just being petty about being left on the road, arguing that a guy my size was perfectly safe walking a short distance. According to her, Joey clearly had the more urgent need. She started to say that she had been helping him her whole life, so I cut her off and asked if she planned on doing it forever. Miriam went silent, her words dying in her throat. I walked into the bedroom, pulled up the covers, and closed my eyes. I was just starting to drift off when I felt her climb into bed and press herself against my back. I reached back and pulled her hands off my waist, telling her I wasn't in the mood. She stiffened for a second, but then tried to pull me closer, whispering that it had been a long time. I interrupted her again and told her I really didn't want to. She sat up abruptly and snapped at me, reminding me that I was usually the one begging for her attention. I rubbed the bridge of my nose and told her I was just tired. She froze instantly because she recognized those exact words as the ones she had used to reject me for years. The room went silent. I looked back at her and asked if there was anything else she needed. My voice was completely flat and detached. I was simply treating her the way she had treated me for years. Whenever she spent all her energy cleaning up Joey's messes, I would get jealous and pick a fight until I was physically exhausted. She would just stare at me with cold eyes during those moments. Once I ran out of steam, she would casually ask if I was finished and tell me to go to sleep if I had nothing else to say. She would sleep peacefully while I stayed awake staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. The next morning, she would look at my exhausted face and ask with a smile if my behavior had really been worth it. Now I finally understood what it felt like to be the one in control. Miriam took a shaky breath and asked me where I had learned to argue like this. The truth was that I had learned everything from her, but I wasn't trying to pick a fight. I told her again that I was just exhausted. Miriam, who had always been the one in control of our relationship, found herself completely speechless. She eventually nodded and gave me a bitter smile, telling me she was going to go stay with Joey Sinclair instead. She followed through on her threat, getting dressed and slamming the front door as she left. I just yawned and went back to sleep, getting the best rest I'd had in years. For the next 2 weeks, Miriam stayed away from the apartment and didn't send a single text. Unlike the other times she had vanished, I didn't bother calling her friends to check on her. I simply didn't care anymore, and besides, her Facebook feed was more active than ever. She started posting daily updates about her life. One night, it was a candlelit dinner with Joey. The next, it was a concert, and the day after that, they were at an art gallery together. There were days when she would post multiple times, and Joey was in every single photo. I was scrolling through her feed and accidentally hit the like button on her most recent post. Strangely enough, she stopped posting photos of Joey entirely after that. I wondered if my like had somehow ruined the mood for her, but I figured she could just block me if she was that bothered. I didn't give the situation much thought and started hanging out with Alan every day. For 6 years, my entire life had revolved around Miriam, and it felt good to reconnect with my old self. One night, while I was at a restaurant with some former classmates, I bumped into Miriam in the hallway as she was leaving a private dining room. The moment she saw me, the annoyance in her eyes vanished and was replaced by excitement as she grabbed my hand. She told me she knew I wouldn't forget her birthday. I was confused and asked if it was actually her birthday today. Her grip tightened as she looked at me with frustration, saying she had even posted a reminder on Facebook for me to see. I checked my phone and saw that she had indeed posted a status about her birthday dinner at a steakhouse. I told her I was sorry, but that I had genuinely genuinely forgotten. I felt her hand tremble as she held mine. For a split second, it looked like Miriam was about to cry as she whispered that I had never forgotten before. Memories of our past birthdays flashed through my mind, and I simply agreed that I used to be better about it. Suddenly, Joey Sinclair stuck his head out of the room, waving a glow stick and asking if I was there to crash the party. A group of Miriam's friends followed him out, cheering that I had finally arrived. They all laughed and said they knew I would never miss her big day. Usually, when Joey was around, Miriam acted like I didn't exist and never introduced me to her social circle. This time was different, though. She held my hand firmly and took me around the room, introducing me to everyone and making sure we toasted together. People were making comments about her finally settling down, which would usually annoy her. Instead, she just smiled and accepted the compliments. I was even more shocked when a tribute video started playing on the big screen. It showed our entire relationship, from the first day we met to our engagement photos. All our happiest memories were flashing before everyone's eyes, but I could only manage a fake smile. If she had done this 2 weeks ago, I probably would have been moved to tears. Throughout the entire video, Miriam never let go of my hand, and by the end, a few people in the room were actually getting emotional. Someone handed me the knife to cut the birthday cake. The room was buzzing with excitement as everyone cheered for me to do the honors. I simply set the knife back down on the table and told them I wasn't actually part of the party. Miriam looked stunned as I explained that I only stopped by because of our history to wish her a happy birthday. I told her I had my own plans with friends in the next room and that they should enjoy themselves. I turned around to leave without looking back, but Miriam grabbed my wrist with a force that actually hurt. Her eyes were bloodshot and watery as she asked if I was really going to walk out on her like this. I stayed quiet for a moment before letting out a dry laugh and asking her if she was really unable to enjoy a birthday without me. I used to be the one who cared most about making her birthday special. In fact, the first time we ever talked about getting married was on her birthday years ago. We had been together for 5 years back then, and I had already purchased the engagement ring. I arranged for all our friends to surprise her at her place the moment she walked through the door. She never showed up that entire night. When I finally reached her, I could hear the crashing waves and Joey Sinclair screaming in the background. I heard her voice sounding exhausted as she told me she was at the beach with Joey and asked what I wanted. I felt everyone in the room staring at me with pity. My face was burning with embarrassment, but I forced myself to tell her that I had a gift waiting for her. There was a brief silence before she gave a careless laugh. She told me she had completely forgotten it was her birthday and said that Joey wasn't ready to leave yet. I actually lost my temper for once and asked her if I wasn't the one supposed to be celebrating with her. Our friends watched me in silence as her voice turned ice cold over the phone. She asked if she had ever requested a surprise in the first place, leaving me speechless. She reminded me that being my girlfriend didn't mean I owned her. She told me she had no obligation to report her whereabouts to me or clear her birthday plans with me. She told me that her birthday plans were none of my business and that it was my own fault for being so oversensitive and planning a surprise without asking. The line went dead, leaving me standing there with the dial tone in my ear. I was the laughingstock of our social circle for the rest of the night. Looking at her desperate face now, I threw her own words back at her. I told her that her birthday was none of my business and asked who had requested this sentimental display. The entire room went dead silent as they processed what I had just said. Joey Sinclair slammed his drink down and stepped between us to protect Miriam. He told me that if I didn't want to be nice, I should just leave instead of ruining the mood. He bragged that Miriam had plenty of people who actually cared about her, that I wasn't special just because I was her boyfriend. As Joey started to lecture me, Miriam suddenly snapped at him to be quiet. Joey looked shocked, but her voice sounded exhausted, as if she was finally remembering how she had treated me. I didn't bother saying anything else and just walked out. Even though my friends were having a great time in the next room, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. Miriam was blowing up my phone with texts, asking if I was warm enough since it was getting cold outside. I ignored her. A few minutes later, she sent another one telling me not to drink too much and offering to come pick me up if I needed an escape. I got so annoyed that I just muted her entire thread. When the night finally ended and I was in an Uber, I saw a string of messages from her asking when I would be home and saying she was waiting for me. I sent her a quick photo of the city lights from the window and told her I was on my way and to leave me alone. She replied instantly, asking me to let her know when I arrived, but mentioned she might be home late herself. I knew exactly why she would be late. She always insisted on driving Joey Sinclair home first. I didn't bother responding and just leaned back to close my eyes. I didn't feel the need to interrogate her about her plans anymore. I ended up staying out with the guys playing video games until the early hours of the morning when my phone started ringing again. I sighed and answered the phone. Miriam asked if I was ever coming home, and I told her I was still out with Alan Brooks. There was a long pause before she asked in a low voice if I had reached the point point where I didn't even want to be in our apartment anymore. I frowned as my game was interrupted by her drama. I told her I was just hanging out with my friends and asked if she enjoyed interrogating me like this. The line went quiet, and I realized the irony of the situation. I was finally the one out having fun, while she was the one stuck at home staring at her phone, which was exactly how she had treated me for years. Miriam took a deep breath and asked when I would be done so she could come get me. I told her not to bother and reminded her to dress warmly. She seemed unusually talkative tonight and brought up the night she kicked me out of the car, saying I had managed to survive just fine. I could hear her voice starting to crack. I just told her I was busy and hung up. She didn't try to contact me for the rest of the night. However, when I walked out of Alan's place the next morning, I saw her Porsche parked right out front. She told me she had to call around to my friends to find out where I was staying. Miriam was standing by the car waiting for me, which made me stop in my tracks. Usually, she was the one who would go missing, leaving me to beg her friends for information. It was strange to see the roles reversed. I was exhausted from the night and just wanted to sleep, so when she told me to get in, I didn't argue. I walked right past her and climbed into the back seat instead of the passenger side. She looked back at me, clearly annoyed and confused by my choice of seating. As she drove, I could see her constantly checking me in the rearview mirror, her furrowed brow making her irritation very obvious. I just kept my eyes on my phone and didn't bother asking her what was wrong. She suddenly mentioned that the tailor shop had called to say my suit was still in production. She had a look of smug disdain on her face as she told me she knew I wasn't serious about calling off the wedding. She warned me that if I kept playing these games, the wedding might actually fall apart for real. I realized what she was thinking and told her that the shop had actually called me this morning to say it was ready. I asked her to pull over so we could pick it up. When we arrived, the tailor was beaming and handed me the suits, saying they were custom fitted to my exact measurements and would look incredible. The clerk offered to let me try it on right then and there, but I told him I'd wait until I got home. The man gave me a knowing wink and suggested that I wanted to surprise my future wife. He told me that if anything didn't fit perfectly, I could bring it back for free adjustments anytime. Miriam's lips curled into a confident smile as she thanked the tailor. After 6 years with her, I could read her mind perfectly. She was convinced that my threats to cancel the wedding were just a childish tantrum and that I had finally come to my senses by picking up the suit. She thought I just wanted her to beg for my forgiveness a little longer. But when we got back to the apartment and I opened the door, a familiar figure was already there. Joey Sinclair stepped forward and put his arm around Miriam's shoulder. Miriam actually looked shocked to see him there, as she had clearly intended for this afternoon to be a private moment for us. I told her that I was the one who had invited him over. I signaled for Joey to go into the bedroom and told Miriam to wait in the living room for a moment. A few minutes later, the door opened and Joey walked out wearing the custom suit. I had to admit it fit him perfectly and he looked quite sharp. Miriam jumped up from the sofa in disbelief. Joey admired his reflection and asked her what she thought, but she ignored him and marched straight up to me. I just smiled and reached out to adjust Joey's tie, mentioning that the suit he wore before hadn't fit him properly since it was tailored for me. I told her that this particular suit had been custom made specifically for Joey's measurements. I asked her if he didn't look much better in something that actually fit him. Miriam was speechless with shock, but I just continued to smile and told her that he should be the one wearing it to marry her since it suited him so well. Miriam's voice began to tremble as she reached out to grab my arm. She asked me if this was some kind of sick joke, but I just blinked and told her it wasn't a joke at all. I took Joey's hand and placed it firmly inside of hers, acting like a matchmaker. I stood there between them like a witness to a happy union. I told them that after 20 years of being inseparable, they finally deserved to be together officially and wished them a long life. Joey looked at Miriam with a blush on his face, but she violently threw his hand away and screamed my name. Joey whispered her name in disbelief, but she didn't even give him a glance. She grabbed my hand so hard her nails dug into my skin, her eyes wide and red with tears. She begged me to stop and told me that this wasn't funny in the slightest. I looked at her and slowly, firmly pried her fingers off my arm. Her hand just hung there in the air as she stared at me with an expression of pure betrayal. I used a calm, measured tone to ask her when she had become someone who couldn't take a simple joke. She seemed to turn into ice as the memories finally hit her. She remembered Joey stealing the ring during the first wedding attempt and him shouting the objection during the second one. Every time I'd been upset, she had told me the exact same thing, that Joey was just joking and that I was the one who lacked a sense of humor. She used to ask me if I only felt happy when I was making everyone else miserable. Miriam's face went pale and all the life seemed to drain out of her as she slowly pulled her hand back. She looked like a shadow of her former self, but she gritted her teeth and begged me to stop this and just marry her properly. She promised she would never make jokes like that again, but I told her it was already too late. My voice voice was devoid of emotion, as if I were discussing someone else's life. She started to panic and insisted that it wasn't too late and that we could fix everything and start over. Her voice trailed off as she finally noticed how empty the apartment looked. She asked where the cancellation letters were and started frantically tearing through the desk drawers. I turned around and pulled out my packed suitcase, telling her not to bother because the letters had already been delivered to everyone 2 days ago. She spun around and stared at my suitcase with horror, asking me where I thought I was going. I told her that I had accepted a director position in Los Angeles and that my flight was already booked. She started shaking her head and crying that I was lying, but I simply told her I had no reason to lie to her anymore. As we stood in the apartment we were supposed to share as husband and wife, I asked her if she hadn't noticed that all my belongings were already gone. She froze as she realized the shoe cabinet I had once filled was completely empty. The only thing left behind was that pair of boots she had given me, sitting alone on shelf. I told her to take care of herself and offered a final, sincere blessing before walking out the door. I heard her let out a gut-wrenching scream, calling my name as I walked down the hall. I could also hear Joey Sinclair's frantic voice telling her not to go and promising that he would be there for her even if I was gone. She screamed at him to get out, and I heard the sound of heavy objects smashing against the floor, followed by her hysterical sobbing. I thought I might have imagined it because I was already so far away, but it sounded about right. I got into my Uber and headed for the airport, leaving the city behind for good. A few years later, I was back in Boston for a major equestrian event. When the lead rider crossed the finish line, the crowd went absolutely wild with cheering. I was standing near the front with Alan, waving a small flag, when the rider removed her helmet. I was completely shocked to see that it was Miriam Vance. The announcer asked her what her biggest wish was in that moment of victory. She pulled a ring out of her pocket and held it up for the entire stadium to see. She declared that her only wish was for the man she loved to finally marry her. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar of approval. I was the only one in the stadium staring at the screen with a bitter smile. The ring she was holding was an exact replica of the one I had bought for her years ago. I had planned to hide it in her birthday cake as a surprise, but she had been too busy watching the ocean with Joey Sinclair to show up. I realized we were actually quite a pair since we even had the same taste in jewelry. She pointed toward the section where she thought I was sitting, and the spotlights immediately swung over as the camera zoomed in. The screen showed nothing but 2 empty seats in that row. Miriam's smile slowly vanished, and her hand holding the ring dropped to her side. As I was walking toward the exit, a car suddenly swerved and blocked my path. Miriam jumped out with bloodshot eyes and called my name. I took a step back and gave her a polite, formal smile while addressing her as Miss Vance. I could see her hands clench in a fist at the sound of such a distant greeting. She asked if I didn't believe her as she walked toward me. She looked exactly as she did 6 years ago, still the same beautiful woman who had captured my heart the moment I saw her. Time had been kind to her appearance, but the fire I once felt for her had long since burned out. I calmly asked her what exactly I was supposed to do. This powerful socialite grabbed my arm and looked at me like a lost puppy. She told me that ever since I blocked her, she had been desperate to explain that nothing sexual ever happened between her and Joey. I just gave her a small smile and told her that I had always known that. Miriam had never been the type of woman to be careless with her virtue. She froze and asked me why I was doing this if I knew she remained faithful. I gently but firmly pushed her hand away and told Miss Vance that infidelity doesn't start the moment you climb into bed with someone else. Her breathing hitched as she struggled to find her voice. She told me she was sorry and insisted she never meant for things to turn out this way. She claimed she had truly loved me from the very beginning and never intended to cause me so much pain. Her voice broke, and the woman who once carried herself as a queen began to sob so hard she could barely keep her feet. I kept a light smile on my face and told her I understood her perspective. I knew she felt she had never technically betrayed me, and that her feelings must have been real, otherwise a socialite like her would never have agreed to 3 different weddings. I paused for a moment, letting my smile grow wider while my voice turned even gentler. I explained that a relationship is about more than just her personal definition of the right. I told her that whatever we had was officially over and that I was happy with my life, harboring no anger or resentment. I mentioned that my company was transferring me to an executive position in Europe and that this would likely be our final encounter. She looked up at me with a face full of pure shock. I told her I wanted to leave her with one last piece of advice. While the younger version of me was willing to put up with her behavior, most other men wouldn't be so patient. I urged her not to let the next man in her life experienced the same crushing disappointment I felt and admitted I lacked the strength to ever deal with someone like her. Miriam whispered in a raspy voice that she didn't have the energy to find another man like me. I simply gave her a polite smile and suggested she take her time and not rush into it. I walked past her, and for some unknown reason, I stopped at the end of the street to look back. She was standing under a flickering street lamp in the distance, and though the light looked warm, it only served to highlight how lonely and miserable she was. I turned away feeling neither sad nor particularly relieved. During my years working in London, a new female equestrian began making waves on the international circuit. I caught a few of her matches on television and occasionally saw her face plastered across billboards. People in the industry gossiped that she competed in every single event and pushed herself to win at any cost just to catch the eye of specific persons. Her loyal fans always denied those rumors, claiming they were just fairy tales made up by the media. I chose to stay out of the conversation. Joey Sinclair had become like a shadow to me, following her to every city and every competition, yet she never gave him a second chance. Eventually, her followers began attacking Joey on Twitter, accusing him of stalking and harassment. During a high-profile interview, a reporter finally asked her if the rumors about her motivation were true. The reporter asked her if she was truly waiting for someone special, and she simply said yes. When asked how long she intended to wait, she paused before answering that she would wait for him for the rest of her life. Alan Brooks brought up the news while we were playing a round of Call of Duty together. I took a quick look at the headline and told him that I didn't care what she did. The real conclusion to this story wasn't the failed wedding, but the moment I finally reclaimed my own identity. Truthfully, no one ever walks away forever based on a single moment. It happens slowly, built up over countless cold nights of being ignored and treated like an afterthought. Disappointment has to accumulate over time, and sometimes it takes a bitter winter for a person to finally see things clearly. If staying in a relationship requires you to trade your dignity for scraps of affection, and your legitimate pain is dismissed as a lack of sense of humor, then that love is nothing more than slow poison. Maintaining boundaries is the only way to protect your self-respect. Knowing when to walk away is the ultimate act of self-preservation. I hope this story helps you embrace the version of yourself that once walked on eggshells and lived with a heart full of resentment. Always remember that walking away from someone who treats you like a secondary character isn't a loss. It is a gain because it finally frees your hands to hold on to the kind of respect and tenderness you actually deserve. There is no point in looking back at a relationship. Once you have made it out of that dark hour, keep moving forward toward the bright future you were always meant to have.